Mackenzie. Hey, this is Owen. Don't forget to like our show and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you by the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. What is one thing that you could do to think, speak, or act kindly today? Go to loveandkindnessproject.org to learn more. Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. So get yourself a pen and paper or open a note-taking app on your phone or computer. Feel free to pause this episode while you get yourself ready. The episode starts at 1 minute and 6 seconds. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645, which is coming in the fall of 2023. In Canada, you can also call 988, the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. The Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And in the United States, 1-877-565-8860, or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not have to be alone. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations on whose territory I live, work, and play. Welcome to We Are the ADHD Family Podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections and building on strengths and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a parent to 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. I want you to feel like you have power and hope. And now, into the episode. If there's one thing I really like, is when the washing machine is just finished washing and the clothes are all ready to be put into the dryer. The next load was ready to go. I opened the door and realized the washing machine's empty. I thought I put the clothes in. Nope. Not this time, Mark. Not this time. Welcome to part 2 of our episode with Karyn Ross. In the previous episode, we went over Karyn's background and how she and I met. We also discussed rising above bullies and how choosing kindness was her way of being her authentic self. I hope you enjoy the rest of our conversation. When you did that first book with Mike Rother.
Oh, with Jeff Liker.
Oh, Jeff, sorry. I have Mike Rother on the brain for some reason today. But when you did that first book, because I have not read it, but I am curious, did you, because that was about, not so, I was going to say, I don't want to say call it about the service industry per se, but were you putting kindness things into that when you were going through that process of what you would write? Because I don't know how you two split up the writing duties.
Oh, so Toyota Way to Service Excellence. So Jeff and I would say, met through kindness, because when I came to the United States, we came on a treaty NAFTA visa, and then my husband was on a student visa, and then he got a job here, but we had to wait numerous years before I could get a work permit or green cards. And so I was an at-home mom. And so I stayed at home and I raised children, even though I had this master's degree and I thought I was going to be an art professor. And then, of course, I had 14 blank years on my resume, and it was not that easy to get a job. But I went to work in frontline customer service, because actually I like customer service and I like helping people. It's a kind of thing. And actually what happened was that I found that I actually worked in a very unkind environment from the management perspective. And also, people who call on the phone for customer service are not necessarily all that kind either. And so there were about 60 people doing this frontline customer service. And although people can't see this, I'm going to say I'm holding up a box of Kleenex, because everyone had a box of Kleenex on the edge of their desk. Not so that they could blow their nose when they had a cold, but so that they could wipe their eyes when they cried on a daily basis when a customer called to scream at them that they'd made a mistake or management was unkind as well. And so I thought, and this is where my art background comes in, I thought there's got to be a better way to do this, right? And there's got to, as artists, we're super creative people, we solve problems. And so I heard the word Kaizen floating around, and to make a very long story short, my fabulous mentor, Leslie Hinkler, who was doing head of, lean in another part of the company, helped me. And she heard about what I was doing and trying to make things better because I was teaching myself. And she said, "Can I just come over there and help you?" And so she showed me that kindness. And then I started reading books, and I was reading all kinds of books about process improvement. And Jeff Liker's book, The Toyota Way to Lean Leadership or Continuous Improvement, came out. They're both in the same year, so I don't remember which book it was, but I had a question. And so I decided I'm going to send Jeff, I looked up his email on the internet. I decided I'm going to send him an email with my question. And so, of course, here I am, some frontline customer service person, self-taught, doing all of this, writing to one of the most famous people in this area. And I typed up the email, then like my finger, like I was like, okay, afraid, you got to hit submit. And then I don't know, there's two things that could happen. Either, it won't respond and I'll have, spend a few minutes putting down my thoughts, or he will respond. So 10 minutes later, Jeff responded. And we started a whole entire conversation. And we just talked all about process improvement, and we got to know each other. And 5 years later, I'd left the frontline customer service. I was actually working in process improvement. And Jeff said, "I want to write a book about process improvement in services." And so we wrote it together. And so his initial kindness of it, again, answering my email. So when people say, "Oh, but it's so easy to talk to you. All I have to do is send you a note on LinkedIn." And you say, "Oh, let's talk to each other." Well, I learned that from somewhere, right? I learned that from Leslie, who said, "Oh, let me come over there and help you." Flew from Rochester, New York to Chicago to help me, right? From Jeff, who's like, "Oh, let me just help you." We learn that kind of behavior. We can learn unkindness from those who lead us. We can also learn kindness from those who lead us, right? And I think a lot of us in the process improvement community, we've actually experienced that kindness from people who are more senior to us, and we pass that on, right?
Yeah.
We absolutely pass that on because we have learned that this is the way to be. This is the way that's going to make a kinder, better world.
And it's funny because I know when I was at my first, I just call it my first real job, which happened to be customer service, but it was the senior directors up on the third floor because I was on the second floor, and God forbid you went up to the third floor, but I had a good enough relationship with a lot of them because I of all the packages I found. It's like, no, Mark's one of the few that's allowed to come up there without question. Don't harass him. Anyways, they're the ones that taught me those sort of things. And it wasn't, I was just trying to be kind when I worked in general. And in something like, especially in something like freight, where you're, constantly being yelled at because something's late or a package has gone missing or what have you. I mean, believe me, I know I've heard and dealt with it all, folks. To have those executives show me and teach me the things that they did, and not only that, just by some of the actions that they did. And I remember telling an early mentor a long time ago, he came to a union meeting. He was an area director, went to the union meeting and met with the drivers and a bunch of us. And he gave out his cell phone. I'm like, "Look, if there's a problem, just call me and we'll deal with that." I'm just like, and I'm looking at Tony and just going, "What in the world?" And I had not really seen that action before. And I told him that years ago, just that because it made such an impression on me because I was young. And if you've got someone this senior that can be that kind, then and they're and they mean it. Why is it so hard for many other things for many other groups of people to sit there and do that? And I think, and when I sit there and I give that example, what it comes up to me is when I think about the school system and the exclusion stuff that goes on up here, excuse me, and having to, have kids included in school activities and having teachers trained and stuff like that. There's so many little things that you can do to show kindness to help make somebody's life easier. And it's not difficult, I don't think. Um,
I
which
don't think
yeah,
Well, I don't think so either. And I think that you're saying the really important thing is kindness is about action, right?
yeah,
And when other people show us how to act kindly, it makes a huge difference because so often people say to me, but if I'm kind, isn't someone going to take advantage of me? Isn't somebody going to walk all over me? And isn't it going to be seen as weakness? And I really thought a lot about that because it's so strange to me because oftentimes taking an action to be kind, which means that you have to put yourself out of your comfort zone, or something that might inconvenience you, like someone gave you their cell phone number and actually guess what? Now you actually might call it or
yeah,
text
yep,
it,
yep,
right? Which will require the person to take time out of their whatever they're doing
yeah,
to answer and talk to you or text you or help you.
yeah,
That takes a huge amount of strength, right?
yeah,
To not just think about yourself. Kindness means that you need to consider others. And it doesn't mean that you just have to say yes to everything. If something doesn't go with your values, you shouldn't say yes to it. It doesn't mean you need to be silent if somebody is acting in a way that you don't like. Kindness means that you have to take an action that's going to have a positive effect or impact
yeah,
on someone else for their perspective. So if somebody is actually doing something dangerous or somebody is actually saying something that's hurting someone else, the kind thing to do that's going
yeah.
to have a positive impact is to actually step up and have the strength and the courage to say something and do something that's going to stop that, right?
Well, and there's also the other aspect too of, and I know I do this a lot, is I try to take a step back and say, number one, what am I actually being asked to do to show kindness to something or whatever that is? But I always tend to ask, what's the process? What's failing? What's falling apart? Why? It's the why. And I will have somebody, I'll ask somebody if they want me to do something. Why do we have to do it like this? What are the events that took place to get there? And to get that context, I think, is critically important because it's going to shape your, I think it shapes your response. And for you and me that are naturally inquisitive people anyways, um, to sit there and to sit there and put that aspect in, I think it shows another form of kindness to the other person because you're giving them a platform, your ears and your thoughts and your attention to trust that you have their best interests at heart. And I think when you're especially when you're doing something like you're advocating in schools for our kids, and I know we haven't talked about the uh your kids and stuff, but like when you're, I know, advocating on Owen's side of things, and even Kenzie as of this morning too, um, being able to find out that other person's perspective before you reply, I think is it's a huge thing. It really is. And it's bridged many gaps, I know, for me.
I agree. And the second act kindly practice in my book, The Kind Leader, is listen with open eyes, open ears, open mind, and an open heart.
Yeah.
Right? Because the if the roots of kindness are empathy and compassion, the way to practice empathy is to actually listen to somewhat what someone else's perspective is and what someone else's thought process is and what someone else's experience is. And I always say open eyes because so much of body language is carried, so much of communication is carried on body language, and you look around at people's surroundings and you go to where they are. And
Yeah.
open ears because you have to listen to the tone of voice and denotative and connotative meanings. And then open mind because lots of times people just tell you things you don't want to hear and you
Yeah.
don't like and you don't agree with. And then open heart, because how can you understand that that person has had there's some reason they've come to the conclusions that they've had and taken the actions that they've taken, right? And then taking an action that's going to create something positive out of that, you're going to have to open your heart to do it. So actually, and it takes a lot of practice. So I myself was reading something this morning and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, that's so ridiculous. And then I thought, well, why would you put that kind of judgment on that? And so often even our own self-talk or, as we get older, we tend to find, things are confirmation bias that go with what we already believe, right? Where in fact, actually, we need to listen with open eyes, open ears, open mind, and open heart, and listen for then those little judgmental voices. I don't have to be right about everything. The thing is, somebody else can just have an alternate opinion. It just doesn't make a difference. If their way is not causing a harm to someone, if my way is not causing a harm, what does it matter if they don't believe the same thing that I believe?
Here is a 20-second kindness break.
Here is a tip for thinking kindly. If you think it's not kind or if it feels wrong, pause yourself and don't say it.
Hi, this is Siobhan from the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. Check out loveandkindnessproject.org and find other ways to carry out kind acts or start a kindness project of your own.
I'm curious about something. I know what it is in my brain. I'm wondering what it is for your brain too. Do you see this as I'm going to ask it wrong. Do you see it as a process? In other words, maybe the only way I can do is explain sort of where it fits in my head. When I think about a process of some kind, if I was so I'm gonna segue and I'll come around to it, and I swear my ADHD brain's not gonna let me mess this up. Last night, Owen, we were going to bed, and he said to me that he forgot that he had a word search for homework to do, and I was like, okay, well, that's fine. Is it downstairs? We can wake up early and we can go after it. Anyways, it turns out he left it at school. And so I thought about when he was talking, he started blaming his ADHD and autistic brain. And I said, look, you're not wrong. I said, you're right. It is your ADHD brain that's doing this because it's keeping yourself organized and all this kind of stuff. I said, I went through the same thing. I always go through the same thing. And so when I see a process of something that's gone wrong, or something where things you can swap out different actions, I view it as a process. And I look at things maybe visually, maybe writing things down, maybe it's a phone thing, just the method to which you use. So I'll finish the own story afterwards. But does your brain work in that way where it's almost like a slot machine or flow chart where you just go, oh, how can I think kindly? How can I speak kindly? Or how can I act kindly? And then you're just going, which one is it? Which path am I going to take first? Is that your brain like mine is?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I got actually the reason I don't think so is my husband tells me that all the time. I got kind of the artist brain that goes doot, 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 and
Okay.
I got a million balls in the air, and they're coming together in different ways.
There's
However,
that part of it too. There's that part of it for me too. I get the little slot machine of things where it's just like it's this and then do. It's like I go between both. But
and then
anyways,
my husband will always say, how did you get to that? Like, can you just explain what went on to get to that? Or why did, like we were talking about this, why did you say that? So, and
that's
with a
okay. Siobhan will ask me the same question too. Like, how did you get from here to there? And then she's like,
exactly.
the look of confusion on their faces is like, what? Why?
I do think, though, that I have a very set process of how to practice, right? And actually, it's written down in the Kind Leader. And it's one of the reasons I wrote the book. So, since I know the first thing I'm probably going to do, because our brains are hardwired for negativity bias, since the first thing I know I'm probably going to think something unkindly, I'm very conscious of when I hear something again, like this morning when I thought I hear myself thinking, oh, that is ridiculous. I'm thinking, okay, how can I change that to assume positive intent? Right. And before I'm going to speak, especially if I'm angry or frustrated or know that there are some things, just like everybody else that trigger me, like, that I say, okay, I have to breathe and I have to do the box breathing and I have to pause or I have to walk away or I can't respond to this email right now because it will be unkind.
Yeah.
Right. And so I do practice those things. And the reason I always say kindness is a practice that takes practice, and kind leadership is a practice that takes practice, and kindness is about action. Sometimes it's about stopping yourself. The action is stopping yourself, right?
Yeah.
Is that it does take practice. And the amazing thing is that anything we practice, we actually tend to get better at it over time,
Yeah.
right? We learn
Yeah.
new things about it, and we have we great introspection and reflection, and we learn things about ourselves, and we can use our PDCA, plan, do, check, act cycle to say, oh, well, maybe if I, try this, it'll lead me to a kinder result. But we actually have to, so I would say for that, I do have a very strong process. Does it work 100% all of the time? Absolutely not. And then I need to remember to be kind to myself too.
Well, and I think that intentional pause, and I think that's something you and Katie really drilled home really well. Because I think it was you two that did that for me. Um, the Katie I mean is a friend of ours, Katie Anderson. This is like the third time I've name dropped her in my shows. The But yeah, taking that intentional pause to know whether or not you're going to, um, what sort of the right response or right action, or not, the right is the wrong word, but what path or what action you're actually going to end up taking. It takes practice to do that, and it's a every day, every 5 minutes sort of thing.
It's true. And we're in a society and culture in which everything is sped up, and oftentimes people are thought to be smarter
Yeah.
if they can respond quicker, right? All of those kind of things. You might hear a little flippy flapping from Big Karma, who is
Just woke up.
found. Yeah, he just woke up from his dog nap over here. But we tend to value people who are quick thinking, who are quick speaking, who can zip off that one liner, whether it's kind or not. And oftentimes we don't value the person who says, let me just pause to think about this.
Yeah.
Right. But in that pause, you have time to consider, to make a choice, to be kind, right? Because you can say, okay, in your thought process, you can say, okay, if I say this, the person might perceive it like this, and here's the possible effect, right? The negative or positive. If I say this, it could have this other effect. And so you have to think, okay, kindness is about creating a positive outcome for someone else. And
When
that
no, go ahead.
that thought process, and again, the more you practice, the faster it speeds up, but it's super important.
Well, and just that thing you just said of kindness, it's really about creating the kind space for someone else. I think is when you look at advocacy, I think especially that, and just the definition of that term being, you're trying to you're trying to influence policy and change through policy, as opposed to activism, which is the opposite of that, which is more action than anything else. Um, Creating, I think, when we're especially when you advocate for kids, you're really trying to break those barriers down. And the one thing I know I tell parents a lot is I'll say, make sure you know what you're asking for to begin with. But how can you but when you're talking to that teacher, you're talking to that administrator or that, person in the school district or what have you, or anybody for that matter, how do you make it a safe space for them to say, to be open and to see your point of view? And it's that's where I think it sort of becomes about them in that way. Um,
Yeah. And
yeah,
a lot of times people haven't been in a space where they've considered other possibilities, and we all have to be conscious that we're unconsciously influenced by all different kinds of systems that we've grown up in, right? And we tend now to think of a computer system, but actually they're political systems, right? And it's super interesting because I
social.
spent 30 years of my life in Canada, which is one political system, and 30 years of my life in the United States, which is totally a different political system,
Yeah,
right? And it's really interesting for me to look at those two things. People grow up in different religions. Religions are systems. They teach you all different kinds of things. Then you go to school, and depending where you go to school, now you're in a system that's teaching you all different kinds of things. Maybe you play a sport. That's a system. And as we grow up, we're unconsciously influenced by those systems. So a lot of times, actually, especially in school systems, because people are often taught to be rule followers, right? We like rule followers.
yeah,
Team players, rule followers,
yeah,
right? That someone will tell you something is impossible. Like when you go to talk to the teacher, the administrator to advocate, they'll just simply tell you something's impossible, but actually it's not really impossible. But actually, that's all they know, right? Or it might be difficult to change a policy. It might be difficult to work around the rules or do something for one child. But
yeah,
they're stuck in systems too. They're just simply stuck in systems too. And when you show them kindness, so last night I went to get my updated COVID booster, and I went over to Walgreens, and there was there'd been a scheduling problem, so I was supposed to go to one Walgreens, then I had to go to another Walgreens, and they were really surprised because we showed up on time, my husband and I, with our papers all filled out. And then there was a young pharmacy tech who was having some problems working in the system, and the pharmacist helped them. And finally, she gets to us, and it's time for our shot. And we're cheerful and happy. And I gave her a kindness button, one of these, the little green background with a red heart, and said, "Thank you for kindness." And it was like probably 6:30 or 6:45 at night by that time, and I'm sure that she'd had a super long day, and she said, "Oh my goodness, you don't know how much I appreciate this."
yeah,
And how just saying thank you for I'm just doing my, and it really took me right back, and this will bring us full circle in our conversation. It really took me right back to frontline, working in frontline customer service for 7 years,
yeah,
right? That tiny amount of kindness, and I could just imagine, people are not feeling well when they're going to the pharmacy, they're tired, they're grumpy, they're in a hurry, their kid is sick, they're whatever it is. Oftentimes they're not kind.
Yeah.
But just that little extra added moment, that thank you for giving me the vaccine. It doesn't matter if it's her job.
Yeah.
It's right for chatting while doing it, for helping the young person learn their job so other people can get help.
It's those little things that make a difference when you're having those conversations too. Maybe a nurse is giving you the shot, but the person that you've been talking to that's been getting frustrated through the system, you sit there, you talk to, as you're done your shot, hey, thanks for the conversation, or thanks for something like that. Those are I think are the little things that are easy to practice, where it's really a big deal. Or when, like, another way of doing it too is, I know if I'm leaving the schools, I'll tell, if my kid's school in that case and I'm not working there, I will, I'll say to the secretaries and whoever, I'll just say, thank you for everything today. And, that's sort of it. And it's nice for people to hear that kind of stuff. And that's another easy way to sit there and practice that, I think.
Right. And the more you practice that, because everyone is in a hurry. Everyone has things they
Yeah.
have to get to. The people who are
It's like,
doing their jobs are in a hurry, but we
yeah.
could actually just stop for a second and say thank you, or smile and say, hi, how's your day today?
And it's not a case of it being hard per se. This is like you and I said to each other the other day, last week. It's not a case of it's hard work. It's just a different kind of work, ultimately.
Exactly.
So,
And the more
yeah.
you practice anything,
Yeah.
the easier it gets. The number one, the very first think kindly practice is assume positive intent. And I think for most people, this is really one of the hardest, but actually it's the one that I practice the most, because as the scheduling person from Walgreens called me and said, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, there was a process problem. The Walgreens system actually scheduled appointments during pharmacists' dinner time, and now we can't take you at that time. And I could hear the person who called, in the tone of his voice, I could hear the fear. And I could put myself right back in that chair in 2006 of customer going to scream at me because, and I just thought, oh my goodness, this poor person, all he has to do now is, he didn't make the scheduling mistake. It's an automated mistake. And now he has to call every single person. And he's just sitting there in fear, waiting for someone to yell at him. Every
Yeah.
single one of us has a choice. We cannot control many things around us, but we can control how we act. We can control how we react. We can control how we speak. And we can control, to a certain extent, our thoughts. Many thoughts arise, but guess what? As human beings, we don't actually have to accept those thoughts. We can change them. So before I have to go and let Mr. Big Karma the dog out, because he's been sitting here kindly helping me with my work for a long time.
Mhm.
Before I let him out, that's the thing that I really want to ask people. I want to ask them to please
That's cool. Yeah.
remind yourself that it is your choice. Kindness is your choice. You have a choice every single day to act, react, speak, and think kindly. Please practice. You won't be perfect. I'm not perfect. I make many kind of mistakes every day. Then we get to apologize to people and practice again. But if you start practicing now, say hi to the person working behind the counter. Say thank you to the secretaries at the school. If you start practicing those small things, it will get easier. And your tiny act of kindness, your tiny word of kindness, will make an absolutely huge positive difference and make a kinder, better world for us all.
And I think the last thing too is that you got to separate the systems from the person, and you have to know what that person is in. You have to know that there's the system overall, but also what that person has control of within their world and what they have no control over everything else. And I think once you practice those things and you practice that awareness, I think it becomes better. I think you can do it easier too.
We assume positive intent. The truth is, 99% of people absolutely doing their best with the best intentions. Yeah. Cool.
Karyn, thank you for everything, and thank you for coming on. And this has been a fun conversation. And
I agree. Best podcast I have been on. So I'm making the heart hands again, and I'm going to say I'm sending you and Siobhan and the kids a big hug, and we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. All right. Have a good rest of the night.
You
Day.
too.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to our show.
If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of the episode, and for that, I want to say thank you. I hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and are walking away with newfound knowledge.
We are the ADHD family.
See change. See you soon for a newfound knowledge. I have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, if you have any comments, questions, or guest ideas, please leave a comment on the Facebook page. Number 2, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people find us. And number 3, if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would make a great guest, contact me through our Facebook page. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change. The opinions expressed by the host and guest are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated.